Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Ernecl. I'm editor-in-chief of Slovene media platform called NTA, which means Nacionalna Tiskovna Agencija, which means National Press Agency. We're not basically National Press Agency in the function, although we're better than National Press Agency in the function because everyone's better than National Press Agency in the function, which is in the function of left wing. And my guest tonight is always beloved guest Frodi Midjord from Skanza Forum. Hi, Frodi, and thanks for accepting my invitation.
Thanks for inviting me again. It's always good to talk to you.
We haven't heard each other for a couple of months now. What's been going on in Europe and in the world with right wing? Have we, since we heard each other for the last time, has it been any better for us or worse since Donald Trump isn't president anymore and Joe Biden is in? No, there you go.
Yeah, I don't really know if Donald Trump per se, that he is out of office, that has changed a whole lot. It may be a little bit of a sign, sort of a sign of the zeitgeist that the tide is turning. I think that we can all see very clearly that there was a lot of optimism and a lot of high energy in 2016, 2017. And of course, if you compare this year and the last year, that has died off to some extent. And I think that is a natural process in a political or metapolitical movement, that it doesn't grow on in a linear fashion. It will grow in waves, and it will contract and expand and contract and expand. And I think we had a massive expansion period a few years ago, and now I do think that we see a lot more of pessimism. But this isn't a short distance run. This is a marathon. This is something that I've said many times as well before, that people who expect this to be a short process of winning an election or something like that, they set themselves up for a lot of failure and a lot of disappointment. Because what you have to see is that as right-wingers, we want and we need a paradigm shift in the West. And things like that take a long time, and they take sometimes generations to accomplish. So you can't expect to just see happiness and progress, massive progress at all times. You'll also see periods of downward energy as well. And I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that with the massive repression and totalitarianism that we've seen lately, of banks going after political activists, payment processors, the massive deplatforming that we've seen, time and time again. And I think the latest example of globalist, let's just call it globalist, totalitarianism is in Germany. There is an election coming up in Germany, and in Thuringia, in Thüringen, in Germany, the second biggest party and the representative of the second biggest party, the Alternative for Germany, which is a national populist party, he was arrested 2 weeks before the election. And, if a thing like that, if Saddam Hussein, just imagine if Saddam Hussein would arrest his political opponent 2 weeks before an election, the West would see that as an excuse for an invasion, to start a war, right? And this happens in Germany, and we're just supposed to accept that. This is insane, but that is exactly what's happening. Björn Höcke, a representative for AfD, Alternative für Deutschland, the Alternative for Germany, he was arrested for a meme, a joking meme, and they've had this, this police decision or this warrant. They've had it for months, but they chose to do it 2 weeks before an election. And any rational person can see that is connected, and that is a highly symbolic gesture from the state arresting the political opposition before an election. It happens in Germany right now.
Yeah, and basically nobody had to say anything about it. While they're always very blunt and very articulate about talking about White Russia, for example, or Russia, about Putin, about Lukashenko, about Middle Eastern dictatorships and so forth. And yeah, basically, I even didn't know about this. This is the first time I heard about it, because nobody talks about it. Our Prime Minister Janez Janša was also taken into custody a couple of years ago before the elections, and this was in the middle of the Europe. And Slovenia is although a small, serious member of the European Union that's about to run the European Union right now, and nobody talks about it. Nobody ever talked about it.
This is something that our establishment, our mass media establishment, and our political establishment tends to associate with countries in the East or countries in the Middle East, or they say that there is political corruption in Russia. Imagine if Putin arrested a political opponent 2 weeks before an election. You would never hear the end of it in the mass media in the West. You would never hear the end of it. But yes, they arrested him on May 20th, and the election is coming up on June 6th. So the election is just over a week away. And they arrested him. They seized his computer, his electronics. They even took his kids' computers and electronics. So this is obviously a very highly symbolic gesture, and it sends a message. It sends a signal that, I would say, it sends a signal saying that we're no longer in this kind of liberal democracy. And we've talked about this before on this channel when we've had conversations, that they tend to want to brag about liberal democracy and the open society, right? But they don't play by those rules. And I think it becomes clearer and clearer for everyone watching this that they can no longer keep that appearance up, because it becomes very obvious out in the open now that when you're arresting the political opposition and when you're silencing people, when you're allowing banks to close down their bank accounts, when you can no longer be in the political opposition and say no to globalism and mass immigration and still be able to have a normal job. You'll be harassed, you'll be persecuted, and you'll even be arrested. You may lose your bank account. Things like this. This is just political persecution that has no place in an open society. So they just have to give up the brand of an open society, I would say.
Yeah, I'm a small scale YouTuber or a journalist or a free time philosopher. And I lost my bank account because I told a joke when interviewing Stefan Molyneux that I was editor-in-chief of a fascist media platform. And immediately I lost my bank account, I lost my job, my fellow right-wingers stabbed me in the back because supposedly that was too much. That was too much for them. What was too much for them? I don't get it. I still don't get it. Yeah, and it always happens to right-wingers, only to right-wingers, and mainstream right-wingers, although it happens to them too. They seem to just go along, and they still believe in this Euro-Atlantic institutions and the West. And what's your...
Yes, it's interesting. This is what I don't know if you're familiar with Jim Goad. He is an American writer. He used to have a term for this mentality of the mainstream people. He called it the Passover Syndrome. From the Bible, the Old Testament, the Passover, when they painted blood over the door to tell the angel of death, "No, go take the other bad guy. I'm a good guy. Go take the other bad guy." And it's the Passover syndrome. They want the angel of death to pass over their house so they're not being persecuted. And they say, no, that is the bad guy. Go take him instead. I think that's an appropriate term. But I'm surprised to hear that even in Slovenia, there's that kind of political correctness going on. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, and for example, today it's been a process going on against our prime minister. Being created ex nihilo by the left-wing opposition. It's our prime minister is being basically impeached because of I don't even know anymore why he's being impeached, because he's been in several senses, a meaning of the senses, impeached for the last months. But yes, he's being impeached, and Slovenia is about to run the European Union, and it's just a mess. The current state of affairs is such that, for example, Prime Minister and his party, which is the biggest party in Slovenia, although it has about it reaches about a third of Slovene population or voting population, and they basically have one media platform which is their own, and the only other media platform they can use and the prime minister can use is basically Twitter. Mm-hmm. And Slovene prime minister is being accused of being too harsh on opponents on Twitter, for example. This is yeah.
It is really a change. I think we can say that there has been a paradigm shift of sorts. There has been maybe not a paradigm shift, because this has been long in the making. This has been we've been seeing it for many years coming up, but I think it has really come up to the surface now in a way that it really hasn't before. With the COVID totalitarianism, I know that people may have different opinions on that, but that is just one example of how people are now being treated with less liberty than they're used to in the West and in Europe. And I think we've seen examples in America of how society has changed into something that we're not really used to as well. For example, with the Biden inauguration, with a huge, massive military presence in Washington, D.C., when he's going to be inaugurated, and they're really flexing their muscles like that. People think, oh, that's ridiculous, but it has a symbolic value, because that is nothing that has happened before. That's not something that's happened before in American history. That is something that people may associate with other countries that are not liberal democracies, countries in the East somewhere, right? And military dictatorships or something like that. It sends a message. It sends a message that first you have a year of rioting and massive violence, Black Lives Matter and the Antifa setting cities on fire and attacking people, burning down shops, looting shops. And then you have a peaceful event on January 6th in Washington, D.C., and the establishment goes nuts. And you have to compare what happened on January 6th with what happened in Seattle, where there was a literal insurrection. There was an insurrection, and it's what they did was they threw the police out of town. They drove the police out of town, and they declared a separate state. That is a declaration of war. And that was completely ignored by the American establishment, by the political establishment. That was fine. But people, we have seen videos of the police letting people into the Capitol and allowing people in, inviting them in, and just them walking around peacefully. That was seen as such a threat against the American political system that they had to basically roll in the tanks, right? And that is, of course, they didn't really feel any fear. They knew this was just a piece of political theater. They knew that this was just a dramatization of a narrative that they want to push. But it is significant nonetheless because they pushed the narrative and they flexed their muscles like that, and they sent a signal saying that you're not allowed to voice your opinion if you're a right-winger. Essentially, Joe Biden has said that right-wingers are terrorists. He's used these terms that white supremacists are white supremacism is terrorism. We've seen them throw Derek Chauvin under the bus, the policeman who arrested George Floyd, and George Floyd died from an overdose in his custody, and they've thrown him under the bus. And all of these things are highly symbolic of what's going on. And it's symbolic of the breakdown of a society, really.
But why on earth are we so dangerous to them? Why? We don't hate anyone. We really don't hate anyone. We just love our people and want for our people to exist.
I think that's a good question. I think there are different reasons for that. I don't think that, they don't actually think that we are dangerous. I think they have a security, an intelligence service. I think they have a lot of information. They know that we are not violent, that we're not actually dangerous. But in order to maintain their own positions, they have to create an enemy, and they have to create a threat, although an artificial threat in a sense, and they have to silence us because in a corrupt political system, their biggest concern is to silence the opponents, is to maintain power. It doesn't matter if they call themselves, Stalin, or if they call themselves the political establishment in America or Germany or the United Kingdom. They still have the same attitudes of when a political system has degenerated to a certain level and it's so corrupt that it's only based on a sort of a desire for power in the elite, and no longer on any actual ideals. They've given up all the philosophical foundations of the actual system. They just want power for themselves, and so they must silence the political opponents, and the only political opponents that exist currently is us. We're the only rebels. We're the only people who go against the mainstream narrative. Otherwise, you have a spectrum of different flavors of the same, right? And we're the only opposition, and we're the only ones who can say that the emperor is naked, that they've built a society on a completely false narrative. They're covering up the truth about many different elements of how their society is built, about crime, about racial tensions, racial conflicts in society, about many, many things that they have messed up. And of course, this is what Sam Francis called anarcho-tyranny. What he called anarcho-tyranny is that they refuse to control the criminals, and that is the anarchy. They refuse to control the bad guys, so they control the victims instead. That is, they have to silence the victims, because otherwise people see that the system doesn't work. So they have to shoot the messenger, you see? They have to shoot the messenger, because otherwise people will notice that these people in power are not doing a good job. They're messing up. They've messed up. They've ruined the society that they are supposed to be in charge of.
It's like shooting the bombs and telling the people that there are no bombs in your society.
It is. It is a piece of political theater, and they know it. The masses don't really know it, but we know it, of course. And it's a piece of political theater. They know that this is a game. They're just painting a picture that is false. And you see this in Sweden as well. Sweden is often used as an example of political correctness gone wrong, with all the massive problems with ethnic conflicts, etc. And the state employs I think the best translation to English would be the hate speech monitor. So that is a person who sits and works full time with just keeping an eye on what people say online, and then he will report them to the police. So what will happen is that generally old people, right? Because old people haven't learned the speech codes yet, so they don't know. The young people are savvy. They know what you're supposed to say online. They know where the limits are. They're often anonymous. They know how the game works, so they know the rules and they know how to play the game. Old people don't know how the online game works. So they will be intimidated in their neighborhood. They will be attacked by groups of migrants. They will be robbed. They will be attacked in their homes. These things happen all the time. And then they get home. They have no power. They have nothing they can do about it. So what do they have left? They go online and write an angry comment saying that enough is enough. We've had enough of this. We've lost our society. I don't feel safe in my society anymore. And then they will say something in anger. And then the state will have a hate speech monitor finding what they say and reporting them to the police for crime think. And then they will be arrested and fined again. So they will add humiliation to the anxiety they already have of having lost their society. So they will be attacked by the people who are supposed to protect them. And this is a very cynical system. It is exactly like communism, for example, as in this film, The Lives of Others, where this guy just is monitoring everything that people are saying so that he can find a little something to bust them on and attack them on. And this is the society we have now. I mean, it's the West loves to make fun of or talk about how horrible East Germany was, but it's exactly the same thing we have now.
A commentator, I presume he's a Slovene, tells about our prime minister, a supposed right-winger, Janez Janša, that he's a neoliberal Zionist shill, and a genuine nationalist should oppose the phony right wing as much as they do the left. People need to get out of the useless right-left paradigm. For example, this whole Slovene right wing, which has been by large produced and sustained by Janez Janša, is Euro-Atlanticistic. They are Euro-Atlanticistic Fukuyama boomers, as I've been calling them. They believe that the world stopped and the history stopped with NATO and EU and so forth, and they're still believers in these institutions and the West and so forth. Although, for example, Janša has been in jail for 2 times as a political political prisoner, and it's hard to grasp. It's hard to get it. Are all these people cynical, or all these people actors in this arena, or is there anything real about them, or are they really, all of them, neoliberal Zionist shills? For example, I've been thinking about, is there any area in the world left for common ethno-nationalists, for nationalists, for right-wingers? Because I've been spotting that this neoliberal Zionist shill speak by, for example, V4 too. V4 has been this Slovene right wingers have been promoting V4 as an alternative to EU going bad. But if you read what V4 has been talking about, what V4 has been promoting, what V4 has been what its positions has been, then you can see that it's not as ideal. It's not even optimal. And a couple of days ago, I read about Putin saying that he hates ethno nationalism, for example. Where can we go? Where can we go?
Yeah, I don't think that Putin will be anyone's savior, and I don't think that the Visegrad or the V4 countries will save anyone either. But I think, and I don't think that they fake it. I don't think that they just pretend to be believers, and I think that is their actual ideology. It's a sort of a liberalism for today, and I think that the left-wing establishment in the West is actually opposed to them. But yeah, they're not our guys. They're not, and this is something that people in the West tend to not understand about Russia, that just as America is a multi-ethnic empire, so is Russia. Russia is an enormous country, and it's an empire stretching over vast areas. It's the biggest country in the world. It has different ethnic groups, and their type of patriotism is loyalty to a state and not to an ethnic group. And it's true that, yes, Putin is opposed to ethnic nationalists in Russia. And I've heard many stories about, ethnic nationalists being arrested in Russia. So I don't think that the differences are as big as we're led to believe in this sort of Cold War propaganda that we see from both sides. So I would say that both sides engage in this type of political theater, which play up the differences between the Western establishment and Russia. I don't think differences are all that big. There are some differences, but I don't think we should exaggerate them. And yes, I think that Viktor Orban, for example, that he started out as a regular liberal. He was a representative of liberal forces. I remember the first times I heard of him, he was held up as a prime example of liberal values, and then he turned into a bad guy. The media, they do these shifts very rapidly, very quickly. All of a sudden, it's sort of like Gaddafi. He was also a good guy and then a bad guy. And, they do these narrative shifts. And Orban is now a bad guy. And I think Orban is genuinely opposed to mass immigration into Hungary to some extent. Definitely, I mean, he's definitely better than any leader of the United Kingdom or Germany or Sweden, right? Because yes, they do uphold some standards, and he has spoken out against the problems of parallel societies, ethnic conflicts, etc. But yeah, those aren't permanent solutions, and it could easily happen that when Orban is out of power, the next guy will easily play along with the EU and take mass immigration again. These aren't permanent solutions. And I think really the underlying problem here is that the right is reactionary. And that is where the Marxists and the left are 100% right. They're correct in saying that the right-wingers, the mainstream right-wingers, are reactionary. Meaning that the mainstream right-wingers don't really have an ideology and a worldview and a goal of their own. They just react against what the left does, and they say that, no, we don't really want this much of that. We want to go a bit slowly here. We want to back down slowly. And that is the problem, because if you're up against an enemy that has a fanatical worldview, and you don't have a worldview of your own, and you just play the reaction game, the response game, right? You don't have your own agenda. You just respond to what the other side does all the time. Then you're going to end up being crushed. And that is going to happen in the long run. And that is why I've said that, we live in a sort of a post-political age in the West now. And I think that politics is somewhat a thing of the past, and I think we need a cultural shift. We need a paradigm shift. We need to understand things differently. And I think definitely since the Second World War, in the post-war era, we've had this ideological insanity really in the West, and we are digging our own graves, and we're playing this game of pretending that we don't see what's going on around us, and that is very dangerous in the long run.
Yeah, Clune Georgie comments, and as far as the pervasive cynicism within mainstream politics go, I do believe it is all utterly cynical, up from prime ministers down to lowly bureaucrats. It is the name of the game, so to speak. Do you believe that too? I'm not sure yet. I'm not sure yet. Really.
I don't think. I mean, it's cynical in the sense that they play the political game. They want power for themselves. They might not be very ideological. They are career politicians. In that sense, it's cynical. But in the sense of ideology, I don't think that they publicly represent an ideology, and in private they have some other ideology. I don't think that. I think this is the outcome. This is the logical outcome of the liberal worldview. And if you haven't broken out of that liberal worldview, you're going to end up somewhere on this spectrum. And it doesn't matter if you're on the right-wing extreme of that spectrum or the left-wing extreme, as long as you're in that paradigm, as long as you're working within that liberal framework of individualism, of universalism, of the primacy of the economy, of the last man, of this kind of nihilism, that's where you're going to end up. I think it's inevitable. So I don't think we need any conspiratorial explanations. I think the ideological cancer that has been ruling us for so long, I think that is the ultimate explanation, really.
Just a moment. I just noticed this Guardian article, which says a useful punching bag, because you mentioned Orban before. Why Hungary's Viktor Orban has turned on George Soros. There are fears that the far right could be emboldened by a campaign against the Hungarian-born American billionaire. This is an article from 2017, which basically says that Soros, in '89, the American-Hungarian financier George Soros paid for Viktor Orban to study in Britain. 2 decades later, he donated $1 million to Orban's government to help the cleanup after the red sludge environmental disaster. So Orban has been was taking money from Soros in the past, and he. What is your most sincere belief about Orban? That he sincerely was a liberal, then he got turned against the Soros because mass migration, or that he?
I think that perhaps in the past someone could have believed in this idea of globalism and the Western model, right? And I think that the more the Western model collapses, and the more you see that the London of Sherlock Holmes has turned into the London of machetes and knives, where the London mayor says that terror attacks, that's now part and parcel of living in a modern big city. And I think that as you see before your eyes that this model, everywhere where it's implemented, the society collapses, is completely destroyed. No one wants to emulate and imitate America. No one wants to imitate London. No one wants their city to become like modern Paris. No one wants that. Maybe a few decades ago, maybe a century ago, they wanted that. But I think that for every year that goes by, I think that, while Berlin is turned into the Middle East, and while Paris is turned into Africa, while Chicago is turned into Africa, while all these big cities in the West are completely destroyed, and normal people and white people don't want to live there anymore, I think that, I think there is a change in the attitude. I think that it was natural, in the past, after the fall of communism, for many people in the East to think that, the West has more money. We can have a better life if we copy the model of the West. We can have a better life, and I think that simply in that people in Eastern Europe now are seeing that no, the West is actually worse. It's a worse model. So I think that many of them are just simply coming to their senses and seeing that this doesn't work, and they don't want to destroy their own country. I don't think that they're that cynical that they actually want to destroy their country. I think that Viktor Orban genuinely doesn't want Budapest to turn into Paris. I think he genuinely doesn't want it to turn into Berlin and be destroyed that way. I think that he cares about his country to some extent. If that is, but yeah, I think that his former views are. I mean, he started out as an establishment figure. I think he's still somewhat of an establishment figure, although there are tensions. But I think he has a will of his own. And it is a similar thing to Donald Trump. I mean, Donald Trump wasn't a brilliant politician in any way, but the establishment didn't feel that they could control him, so they hated him. But I don't think he had a hidden agenda, and I don't really think that Viktor Orban has much of a hidden agenda either. I think that he's just come to the realization that, the Western countries are completely destroying themselves, and he doesn't want to do the same thing with his country. I think it's natural for Estonia to look at Finland and see that, okay, this thing is really destructive, what's going on in Finland now with mass immigration. And Finland will look at Sweden and say that, okay, maybe this is bad. And, countries will learn from each other's mistakes. I think that's, it's a genuine process. The problem with people like Orban and the problem with other people in Eastern European countries is that they still have the liberal worldview. That is, that they don't have an ideological foundation. They just have this instinctual. They work on instinct, seeing that, okay, this doesn't work. We have to slow down mass immigration. But the basic framework is still not what it needs to be. We have to have an ideological nationalism. We have to have a very ideological nationalism. So that is why, although the Eastern European countries are now working as an example for, why we should go with nationalism rather than globalism, I think they're still fragile because they're gonna be tempted to be manipulated. And, any system that depends on one person is fragile. So that, when Orban is out of power, who can tell who who's going to come after him, and maybe that person will be manipulated by the EU, and then we're back to square one, right? So what's needed is an ideology. We need a cultural shift. We need a cultural paradigm shift, and a political, philosophical, ideological paradigm shift. So, although we have these strong politicians who can withstand the pressure from the EU and other globalist forces, that's not enough,
Some right-wingers in Hungary have been calling cynically Budapest a Judapest, which basically means that this capital of Hungary is being financially and in some other ways influenced by wealthy Jews. And Orban historically went after this right-wingers, calling them anti-Semites, for example. And I wonder, and I question myself, how can you be based about the harm a man like Soros can do to your country, and then be so full of animosity towards your countrymen, thinking that there is not only one Soros in your town,
Well, I think it's really quite simple. I think that, and it's true, yes, Budapest, it has a massive Jewish population. It has the biggest synagogue in Europe. It is, there are many Jews in Budapest. There's no doubt about it. When it comes to why Orban doesn't see them as a problem, well, I think that probably compared to London or other places, the Jews are less politically active probably in Hungary. So they keep a lower profile, and so they're less politically fanatical in Hungary than they would be, for example, in England, as far as I understand. But then again, there's also the element of people. Most people aren't very smart. A lot of people are very, very stupid. In fact, the vast majority of the entire population of the world is very, very stupid. And, maybe 1% of the population can look underneath the surface and see what's underneath the surface. But, most 99% of the population will look on the surface and they will just see that. They will only see the surface level problems, so they will become reactionaries. And you will see that everywhere in Europe. You'll see that, well, it isn't Jews going around raping people and forming grooming gangs. Well, that could be debated with trafficking, etc. But they see Muslims in burqas, and they see Arab gangs, and they say, oh, that is the problem. But and most people will be that stupid bull running after the red cape instead of running after the matador, and they will just go after the surface level problems of anything that happens, and they will just they will there's a sinking ship, and they will just put a little bandage on the big hole in the hull that keeps taking in water, but they will ignore the surface they will ignore the more deeper problems. And I think it's very easy to persuade the masses, saying that Jews are they don't pose any problem for us. It's just have you seen Jews in aggressive gangs attacking people on the streets? Have you seen Jews? Are the Jews doing these suicide terror attacks? No. You don't see the Jews doing that. It must be the Muslims. It must be this or that. And stupid people who don't know anything about history, who don't know anything about politics and society, they will buy that description, and they will go with that. And I think it's simple as that. And especially considering that it's somewhat acceptable and okay to criticize Muslims and criticize other, people from Africa, North Africa, and the Middle East, or whatever the massive immigration comes from, because they have no real institutional power. Whereas, what side your bread is buttered on. You don't bite the hand that feeds you. And you don't go after the people who have massive institutional power. I think this is a matter of which behavior you can get away with and what you're going to be really punished for. And I think it's really that simple. People are, they know where their comfort level is. And you can quite easily, definitely as a populist political leader, you can quite easily criticize the Muslims, because 99% of the population will recognize the problem, and they will agree with you and say, it might not be polite to say so, but yes, it's actually true that it is kind of unpleasant with mosques and with these prayers and with terror attacks and all these things. But at the same time, if you criticize the Jews as a leader of a populist political party, first of all, 99% of the population will not understand what the hell you're talking about, because they don't understand it. And at the same time, you will be massively attacked by the mass media, by the institutional power of the financial system, with everything, with absolutely everything, relentlessly. So it's an easy way out.
About right-wing populists, about mainstream right-wing, they're all mainstream. They've been criticizing Islam or Muslims in such a funny manner. For example, they've been criticizing them as in Muslims don't share our Christian values, and then when you ask them themselves what are these Christian values, they basically mean that their women cannot cheat on their man, and their homosexuals cannot have sex orgies. This is our Christian values. This is the Christian values right-wing populists have in mind when criticizing Islam. Besides, of course, terrorist attacks and I don't know, this voices from mosques and so forth. This is what I wanted to comment on. Every girl from Budapest I know is partly Jewish. I think most of them are fully integrated. Yeah, but what fully integrated means not assimilated, which means that the final horizon politically for an integrated person is civic nationalism.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, they will find, ethnic nationalism. They will not find acceptable. No. I think that is probably a quite big exaggeration that every girl from Budapest is partly Jewish. That's not really true. But there are many Jews, but I think that they are far less of a political fanatical group as the ADL in America or Hope Not Hate or these kinds of fanatical groups in England and in other parts of the West. I do think that they probably blend in better, not perfectly, but better in Hungary than in other countries. I do think that probably now. I mean, they've had massive. I mean, we can talk about the communist terror under Bela Kun and other horrible pieces of history, right? And where it was just Jewish terrorism against the population. But yeah, I think there is a difference in the behavior of Jews in Hungary versus other countries in Europe, probably. But yeah, that is a problem of liberalism. That these civic nationalists, these counter jihad people, these liberals who just want to stand up for liberal values as a form of civic nationalism, they will say that the problem of Muslim immigration is that the Muslims are opposed to gay pride and other kinds of sort of social degradation. So there is a massive ideological problem there, I'm not really sure if that really goes for countries like Hungary or Poland. They tend to be more of more radically conservative in the sense of objecting to homosexuality and objecting to, and they're also more religious in that sense. Which doesn't mean that they necessarily are racially conscious, but at least they are opposed to that kind of those kinds of values, at least.
Considering Flebus says some leftists get a taste of the JQ through the Palestine issue. Why don't the leftists get it? What if we said to the lefties, yeah, listen, what if you put the Israelis to Europe, for example? What would they do? Would they become ethno-nationalists in Europe?
I mean, to be fair, there has been some encouraging development on the more radical left in recent years. In Scandinavia, for example, you've seen many of these, there's the old school left, which was more Marxist, which was more about economy, the working class, those kinds of things. And then the left made an ideological shift and became about sexual minorities and ethnic minorities and feminism and transvestites and all these kinds of things, right? And the old school left that is still about the working class, there are some remnants of that left, and it's quite obvious that if you're involved in workers' unions, for example, to keep up worker wages, and then they start importing slave labor from from Africa or whatever to dump the worker. I mean, it's quite plain to see, right? It's very obvious. So that kind of old school left, many of them have started reacting against mass immigration like this, and they've seen pattern with maybe the Jews in Israel aren't all that different from the Jews in the rest of the world, but I think that there are massive problems in Europe and in our cultural mentality with things like slave morality. You can the Jews are victims in Europe, but they are the master in Palestine, and therefore the Palestinians are victims. Therefore, it's okay because they're the underdog. Therefore, it's okay to side with them. It's okay to pity them because now they are the underdog. They are poorer, and it fits the left-wing narrative, right? Whereas in America, and Europe, you can say that the other ethnic groups, they're just minorities. They're persecuted. We're not allowed to object to them. Of course, that's a very surface level phenomenon. But there is something with pathological altruism in the West. Pathological altruism, which says that if a person is mean to someone else, you're allowed to stand up for that guy. If he's mean to you, you're not allowed to stand up for yourself, because that is a sort of a sign of greatness that you don't stand up for yourself. And it is completely, it's a form of mental retardation that really is in our culture. And it is a massive problem that we're not allowed to even stand up for our own children when they're being attacked, but we can stand up for the other guy when he's being victimized. It's a very complex situation, but I do think that the reason why the left loves Palestine is because they're poor and they're the underdog, and you can sort of say that that's a religious issue, that's not an ethnic issue, and people are very good at rationalizing to themselves why they think as they do. They can think the dumbest things in the world that are completely contrary to all empirical evidence, and then they can rationalize it to themselves afterwards.
It was good that Tucker Carlson pointed out the ADL's hypocrisy on this recently. I haven't heard it. Have you heard it?
Yes, he basically says that these people, the ADL plainly says that it would be a problem for Jews to lose control over Israel as an ethno state. Well, what about us? What about us? Are we allowed the same thing? I mean, I don't remember exactly how he phrased it, but they went after him. They demanded that he should be fired. Tucker Carlson he's putting good talking points out there. He's really puncturing the balloon on many of these areas, and he's doing a fantastic job. I mean, that's the thing. You can't be. Some people on the right, they love their political ghetto. They just want to stay in the ghetto. They hate everyone who can communicate without more people outside because they're comfortable in their political ghetto, right? It's their identity now that I'm in the political ghetto. So they think that, no, Tucker Carlson, he isn't 100% on board with everything a right-winger should be, therefore he's no good. Well, Tucker Carlson reaches millions and millions and millions of people. If he says, 50% of what we say, I would say that's pretty good. It's a step-by-step process. It's the same thing with Jordan Peterson or other people. I don't think, and this is something that I've said a million times, and this is with regard to the alt-light and with Donald Trump or with Jordan Peterson or with Tucker Carlson or with anyone else, Molyneux, for example, I will bet my life that no one will start as a genuine right-winger like myself, for example, and then listen to Jordan Peterson and go leftwards because they have such great arguments. That doesn't happen. It simply doesn't happen. When people listen to Jordan Peterson, they're only converted in one direction. And they start by questioning the left-wing narrative. And when they've started questioning it a bit, then maybe they will move on to reading Jared Taylor or Kevin McDonald or someone else, right? But they never, ever move in the other direction. There is no danger of, Tucker Carlson or Jordan Peterson converting people on the radical right to become more like center right wing politicians. That's not going to happen. I don't see the danger in that.
Although he tries, Jordan Peterson tries to do that.
I know, but I
But
think he fails.
Yeah, he fails badly. He fails badly. He has to do something about it. I'm joking.
I think that generally speaking, the left, the intellectual left, and the left-wing establishment, they may be stupid, they may not, be intellectually on point, but I think they have quite accurate political instincts. They see that, okay, Tucker Carlson is dangerous. They see that Jordan Peterson is dangerous because they understand that, okay, if people start listening to that, then who knows, maybe they will actually take the next step and read Kevin McDonald or something else, right? They know that is the real danger. They know that they're not going to recruit. No one is going to start by reading Kevin McDonald, understanding sociobiology and Jewish influence in the West, then listen to Jordan Peterson, and then become a left-winger. That has never happened. I mean, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And the left knows that because they know they're intellectually bankrupt. They know they have no intellectual ammunition.
Yeah, but they, as you said, they have good instincts about it. Yeah. They can recognize the most subtle dog whistling to the ethno-nationalism and call it a gateway drug. Yeah, they call them all. Molyneux, Tucker Carlson, Peterson, they call them all gateway drug to far right. Although all these people don't want to bring people to far right, but they do it. They do it inevitably.
Yes, they do. They do call them gateway drugs, and I think they are gateway drugs. I think it's pretty obvious that the net effect of people like Tucker Carlson or Molyneux or Jordan Peterson is that they have helped the genuine right to grow. I think that is obviously the net effect. They have not shrunk it. They have not minimized the radical right. They have helped us recruit more people. They've helped us reach more people. And that's where the left is 100% right on the issue. They are a gateway drug. And I think we should appreciate how effective that is.
Yeah. Although I sincerely find Jordan Peterson a very intelligent man. And I have to be sincere to say that I'm surprised that it seems that he himself sincerely thought that he's going to bring people more to the center by articulating some things the way he does. At his like 50 years old. How old is he? He should have known
more, closer to 60, probably.
He should have known better.
Yeah, I think he. I don't think he's stupid. I don't think he's a genius. I think he's a mid-level intellectual in the West today. But it's what they call low-hanging fruit, right? To criticize the basic bitch elements of the radical, insane left is very simple. He has done a very simple job, become very rich from it, and just by nudging people in the direction of criticizing the dumbest elements of the left, well, some of those people, they might not see clearly, but they might not be completely blind. So if they're only half blind, they will start seeing the other flaws on the left and the other lies. If the left, their entire message is that there are no racial differences in the world, for example, right? And I mean, the dumbest person, anyone can see that is just a blatant lie. That is obviously a lie. It's so obviously a lie that everyone knows it, but they just the only thing they need is a little bit of permission to acknowledge it to themselves that this is actually a lie, and when someone starts questioning, okay, these people are the leftist establishment it's just political charlatans, and when someone starts calling them out on it, the snowball gets rolling, and it will just grow. And I think it has. If you compare the radical right now with what it was 15 years ago, there's no comparison. We were completely insignificant 15 years ago. We had no reach. We didn't reach any people. And then all of a sudden, people who reach tens of millions of listeners and viewers start saying, important elements of our message. Of course, that is going to have a massive effect.
This comment is interesting to me. I think in America, most mixed people choose not to be white if they can because of the mainstream culture. Even in Slovenia, for example, I can talk from my own experience. I'm half Slovene, half Macedonian. My mother is Macedonian, and Macedonians are sort of white. Sort of white, although they have some Turkish probably mixtures more than Slovenes, for example. Not my part of the family, because the whole Macedonian part of the family has red hair, which is interesting, but it's not important right now. What I wanted to say is that when you come from a mixed family in Slovenia, where they're all basically white or Caucasian or whatever, yes. Even here is a mainstream culture waiting for you and saying, if you lean towards the direction of ethno-nationalism, being proud of your father's heritage and so forth, then there's a culture, then there's people coming to you and saying, the real Slovenes will never consider you truly Slovene. You're only half-blood, you're not pure Slovene, and so forth. And if that's happening in Slovenia with white people, why wouldn't it in America when there are people of mixed races?
Absolutely, and I think it's very obvious that people. One instinct that people have that is very strong is that they will easily see what kind of behavior they're rewarded for, what is going to be applauded, and what are they going to be attacked for. And if we had white privilege, I don't think anyone would lie and say that, oh, I'm actually Indian, Native American, like this Warren, or what's her, Pocahontas that Trump was making fun of. People in America, they lie. They make up some sort of, I'm 1/8 Indian, so now I can own a casino or some bullshit, right? I mean, they make up this bullshit and they lie and say that they have some non-white ancestry, and that is what they identify with. And so they will say, I have I'm actually an Indian, or I'm actually this or that, right? And that is, I think that shows quite clearly that yes, you will be rewarded for claiming that you belong to an ethnic minority, for example, and that is even explicitly stated in recruitment to universities. You will get favorable treatment if you belong to some non-white group. You'll have an easier time getting admitted to prestigious university thing. So people lie and say that and say that no, I'm actually not white, and everyone can see that they're white.
Dennis, where did you go? I invited Dennis before when I saw him in comments that he can come, and now he got away. Dennis, where did you go?
So I don't really know how long you want to keep this going. I'm a bit pressed for time, so...
I think we basically did all what we had to do for today, I do believe. So, thank you, Frodi. Any final thoughts on today's discussion?
No, I think the important thing for us to realize, especially when a lot of people they become black pilled, when they see that people are being like the politician I mentioned, Björn Höcke, in Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. He was arrested before an election. We see all this growing totalitarianism, and people might be dejected and think that all hope is lost. I think it is important for people to keep in mind that any political growth comes in waves. It's not linear, and it's not going to grow and grow and grow and grow and never take a step back. It is 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And the only thing you need to do is have a stoic mindset and just keep going, and do what you believe is right, and that's the only thing you can do, and that's how we'll keep taking these small steps in the right direction, and after a long time, you'll accumulate a lot of small wins, and that's what really makes the difference in the end. It's like going to the gym. You can't go to the gym once and think that you're going to be ripped. You have to do it every single day. You're not even going to see any difference from one day to another. But over a 2-year period, you'll definitely see a great deal of progress.
Okay, thank you, Frodi. It's been a pleasure as always. I hope we can hear each other again soon, not in a half a year as we did now. Thank you once again, and have a pleasant evening and a good night.
Okay, thank you for inviting me. Bye-bye.
Thank you. This is what I'm going to put on. Okay, guys. Frodi left the building. Thank you for commenting. Thank you for listening. And God bless, as Dennis said. Dennis, I hope we can see each other on a stream in a couple of in the next days. Good evening and good night, and God bless.